the most basic concept of the hook serve. The difficulty this hook serve poses to the opponent. Where does it make them uncomfortable? First, the hook. It's because we use the racket to brush the right side of the ball, creating a right side spin that curves towards everyone's forehand, their right side, then combining it with the hook serve's side backspin and side topspin, and adding some deceptive motions, making the opponent, who already finds reverse spin hard also unable to clearly see topspin, then they will feel uncomfortable. Okay, this right side is the most primary point, so let's divide it into two points. How to create a right side spin. That is, the entry point for brushing the ball. Second, this is a problem many friends often encounter. They clearly set up the hook serve pose at the beginning and the hook serve motion. But why does the ball they serve ultimately not curve when you look at it? Let's first talk about the first and most basic grip. First, everyone, you can take a look. If we want to brush the right side of the ball, the hook serve, as the name implies, is a posture where the wrist is hooked up. To make it easier for us to use the racket to brush the right side of the ball, creating this right spin based on our original grip, we need to make some slight adjustments. How exactly to adjust? Let's first talk about the shake hand Everyone, grip. Look at the normal shake hand grip. We use this part of the racket, the shoulder of the blade, resting right in the middle gripping of the web like of the this, hand, right? To make it easier to hook the wrist inward, we need to take this racket and make a small turn to the right side. This way, everyone will find that the position of the blade's shoulder is no longer facing the exact center of the web. It faces approximately our first joint below the index finger here, stuck in this position. In this situation, when we hold the racket, you will notice the distance of the thumb is compared to a normal grip is extended, and on the back, our index finger becomes shorter. This way, everyone forms a process of hooking the wrist. Then when hooking the wrist, it's more convenient to brush the right side of the ball, forming a right side spin that curves to the right. Okay, this is for shake hand. Now let's talk about penhold. Come, penhold, friends. First of all, on the front, it's relatively more complex. For the force exertion of the two front fingers, priority goes to letting the thumb exert more force. During the process of the thumb exerting force, our index finger needs to learn to just rest on this racket, rather than pressing desperately onto this racket. Everyone, you may notice, the more force the thumb exerts, the more this racket will hook inward, right? But if at this moment, your index finger exerts force too, the racket becomes flat again. So we must ensure the thumb exerts more force and the index finger exerts less force. Now let's talk about the fingers on the back. Everyone should know there are two types of penhold grips. One is the three fingers stacked. This is for pushing. There is another kind. The three fingers are lined up side by side on the rubber. This belongs to the reverse penhold backhand. So when we serve the hook serve, we use this middle finger on the racket's central axis. And then our ring finger presses on the rubber. That is, it's a reverse penhold backhand grip method on our back. This way, it will be more convenient for us when holding the racket to form a state of a hooked wrist. Come, let me show you. This is the normal shake hand grip. The racket face is basically pointing forward, but when I turn my racket to the right, look, in this state, has my racket hooked inward? Okay, the normal penhold grip also has the racket face pointing forward. Now I exert more force with my thumb. Relax my index finger, and the three fingers on the back can line up flat against the rubber. Let's see, has my wrist also hooked inward? In this state of inward hooking, everyone can simply understand it as the front of your racket. Your forehand rubber is basically facing the area of your own chest. You are facing yourself. You can't say the racket faces forward, nor can you say the racket faces outward. Racket face pointing forward produces pure backspin. Racket face pointing outward produces left side spin. Racket face pointing in produces the hook, serves right, side spin. So gripping it this way is just so that when your front rubber is facing yourself, our wrist can be in a relatively relaxed, loose state, so that finally when exerting force, you can have a significant acceleration at the moment of contacting the ball. If we don't adjust the grip and forcefully hook our wrist inward, You will find that when you hook inward, your wrist feels very uncomfortable. If it's uncomfortable, it means your wrist will be stiff. If your wrist wants to exert finally force, the force of your serve will come from the body and shoulders, including my elbow and my upper arm. Then it won't be able to use the force of my wrist and forearm, and its spin won't come out. This is a very crucial point because many friends force it in that position to serve. You will find my serve relies entirely on what? Relies entirely on my whole upper arm and shoulder. But if I adjust my wrist is relaxed, then I serve very comfortably and spinny. Why? I can use the snap force of my fingers and wrist. Only then can I grip brush the ball. This is the first point. Okay. Then the second point involves the stance for a hook serve. And a reasonable way to store energy. The stance. We basically still for the convenience of everyone's viewing. I am now standing on the forehand side to serve. Even though I stand on the forehand side to serve, left foot forward, sideways to the table. Why stand sideways to the table? This is so that in the instant during the weight transfer, and in the process of contracting the abdomen and during what everyone calls waist rotation, there can be a space created for body force exertion and waist rotation. If I stand flat and don't pay attention to my stance, if I want to serve onto the table, inevitably, my body can only lean forward. Once I try to use my waist and center of gravity, I will transfer the power directly to the side, and the serve will miss. So you must learn to stand sideways to the table. That's the first point. The second point, which is also very crucial, is storing energy. How do you store this energy? The second step is actually tossing the ball and bringing the racket back, pulling the center of gravity back at the same time. When bringing the racket back to store energy, what principle must everyone observe? The body's center of gravity drives our arm to store energy. It's not just simply pulling the hand back. It's more about the backward pull driven by the center of gravity. When the center of gravity drives the backward shift, everyone saw we just talked about the stance. It's sideways to the table, right? A method with the left foot forward and the right foot back. Look, when I am preparing, my center of gravity is leaning forward, pressing forward. When I bring the racket back to store energy, my center of gravity shifts to the back, right leg. There's a feeling similar to leaning back. Because my center of gravity has shifted, the power in my leg has gone to the back. Then at the instant I exert force, I once again transfer the power of the center of gravity in my leg. See? Like this. Have you all noticed? When I use my body to drive my hand to exert the force, rotation of my waist, and the force exerted by my hand, only then do they look coordinated. If my center of gravity stays here, and I only use my waist and hand, everyone, my force exertion is actually very awkward. See? I used a lot of effort. Even my glutes are working hard. There's no power transferred to the ball. So you must first learn to use your center of gravity to drive. Our arm. Okay. What exactly does this arm refer to? Look, our arm. It is divided into fingers, wrist, forearm, upper arm, elbow joint, and our shoulder. They all belong to our arm, right? Okay, now let's see what I use. Using fingers and wrist to serve. Fingers, wrist, and forearm. Everyone, look at this rotation. This is served using fingers and wrist. Very spinny and very curvy, if I use my upper arm to serve, even if I use a lot of strength, you see, the serve doesn't land. If I use my upper arm, it's not that spinny, right? The speed isn't that fast. Why is that? Why shouldn't you use your upper arm and elbow? This is because when we generate spin, in the final instant of exerting force, it relies on the fingers driving the wrist and also driving the forearm a bit, forming a grabbing action on the racket, forming a feeling of an instant braking and friction, including what many friends often say. What is called brushing the ball well? What is called eating into the ball? It refers to whether the force from your fingers, forearm, wrist, at this instant, can be applied to this ball. Did everyone see? It doesn't mean my whole arm is exerting force. If my forearm and wrist don't apply force, then the force finally produced won't be applied to the ball. And even less so, will it be applied to the racket. Therefore, everyone must learn to use the body's center of gravity to drive our fingers, wrist, and forearm, to store energy, our upper arm, elbow joint, And what else? Our shoulder. It's because when the center of gravity shifts and the fingers and wrist bring the racket back to store energy, they drive the upper arm and elbow joint to form a displacement. We must not do what? Don't use the elbow joint and upper arm as the main points for storing energy. Rather, they should be points driven by the forearm and wrist. So you see, when you store energy, you should feel like your forearm and wrist are relaxed. The elbow joint is opened up, and the upper arm is, hey, relatively and also fixed. Quite comfortable. It's definitely not. This feeling, did everyone see? This is when serving the hook serve. A core element, because where you store energy is where you must apply force from. If I store energy in my upper arm and elbow joint, but don't store it in my fingers and wrist, then when I exert force, I will only use my upper arm and elbow. I certainly won't use my fingers and wrist. Then you serve, no matter how much force you use, you won't be able to generate spin. Bluntly, for many friends, your posture might look very grand, but it might not even match me just taking this and casually flicking my fingers and wrist. This ball curves when everyone served. Can take a look. When I don't bring the racket back to store energy, isn't the ball very curvy and spinny? It's just this principle. Okay, now that we have this energy storing, then in this energy storing phase, tossing the ball and storing energy happen simultaneously, right? Then are there rules for tossing the ball? Yes, there are. First, tossing the ball has rules. What rules? The most common issue with tossing the ball in matches that everyone talks about is the issue of tossing backward. Tossing backward. What is tossing backward? Tossing backward means you don't toss the ball vertically, with a certain arc. So this arc, friends, how is this backward toss defined? The referee can't possibly hold a ruler and stare at you. They just use their naked eye. So how do they measure it? Is it 30 degrees? It's impossible to measure that accurately with the naked eye. What do they look for? You see, tossing backward is just throwing this ball directly onto the racket. See? My racket is throwing it directly onto the racket, not tossing backward. What is not a foul? Everyone look, this is not considered tossing backward. What's the difference between them? The difference is that tossing backward is throwing directly onto the racket. It's in the form of a parabola, look. It has a highest point coming down from above like this. It's not thrown directly onto the racket. Then it's fine. This kind of ball toss of mine, look, will absolutely not be called a backward toss. Why? My ball goes upwards. It comes down in a parabola. If I were to serve like this, then it's over. This ball is obviously a backward toss. A combined force serve. Then why do many friends like to toss backward? It's because during the process of tossing backward, it allows us in this hook serve to better apply force. To be able to exert strength in exerting tossing the ball, this depends on 1. The power of the toss. The direction. Let's talk about the simple direction first. What does direction refer to? Tossing the ball, it can be vertical. Right? It can be tossed forward. It can also be tossed backward. These are all not fouls. But why does choosing to toss backward make it easier to serve? Everyone look, for most of our serves. For example, first, the left side spin. This is the left side spin, I'll serve one from the front side. Look, left side spin. Including what? The hook serve. The hook serve I'm teaching you today, including what else? The reverse pendulum serve, right? What do these excellent serves have in common? Their direction of storing energy is basically storing energy backwards. Look, I'll show you from the side. When I serve this left side spin, look, my energy storing is backward. When I serve the hook serve, the energy storing is backward, right? And when I serve the reverse pendulum, I'm also storing energy backward towards my chest. The direction of tossing the ball must basically be what? Be consistent with our direction of storing energy. See? My force is stored backward. Then my ball needs to be appropriately tossed backward. But it must definitely be in the form of a parabola. Tossed backward, it can't be thrown straight onto the racket. Well then, why? Must this ball tossing direction be consistent with the energy storing direction? If my tossing direction is consistent with my energy storing direction, my tossing direction and my force exertion direction, are they opposite? Right? Well then, look, if the ball is tossed backward, and my force happens to go forward. Did everyone see that? This is like two cars. One, this ball is driving from south to north, and my force, my racket, is driving from north to south. The two of them meet halfway, make contact, collide, and create friction. Doesn't that also mean, that the force generated between them is greater? The racket borrows the ball's force, and the ball also borrows the racket's force. Their interaction force combines. The force on this ball. That is to say, the force on this ball. Besides the force we exert ourselves, part of it also comes from our tossing of this ball. Understand, friends? This is the first point. Then the second point is its power. Tossing the ball, everyone look. Power. Many friends toss it like this, gently lifting it. Look, gently lifting it, just this kind of feeling. Actually, this serve is just average. If I want to serve faster, with a lower and flatter arc,